Good afternoon and welcome to Sunday Art Talks with the Gabriola Arts Council. My name is Carol Ferguson. I'm the Executive Director and I'm pleased to be in Karen Curry's studio on the south end of Gabriola Island. And to start us off, Tim is going to give us a view of most of the studio and Karen will tell us what pieces we're looking at. So as we pan over my shoulder, we see these two pieces.
Those are from the Traces of Water series. And in the corner, I'm not sure if you see those, but there are a number of smaller studies that relate to the larger works. The four pieces directly behind Carol and I are from the series Nearly Dusk All Day Now. These are all from 2020. And then directly behind me on the easel is the final piece in the Traces of Water series that I've just recently completed. And as we go into the far corner, there's a piece called The Edge, which is a piece that came after the book Ancient Light, which is a collaboration between myself and Kay Louise Vincent. Generally, I have examples of work from different series on the north end of the studio, and then on this south wall of the studio is my working wall where I change things up as I go, where I can make as much mess as I like.
I love the floor. I think it's one of the best parts of the studio. It's fantastic. So Karen, let's start with a history lesson. Tell us who you are, where you come from, and how you ended up on Gabriola.
Okay, happy to. Well, starting at the beginning, I was born in Yellowknife. It does seem, I think, maybe strange to bring up that far away, but I often think that all those early years of being by not the ocean, but by the lake and clambering around on the rocks of the Precambrian Shield, that does become part of my artist vocabulary. So I love being places with rocks and water, and it's been, a long history there. As a teenager, I moved to Edmonton with my family and subsequently went to the University of Alberta with a specialty in printmaking and in photography. I stayed there for a few years after university, working as a technician in the printmaking department and as a founder of SNAP, which is the Society of Northern Alberta Print Artists. Mm-hmm. So, integration with printmaking and my career really started then. As a result of my work with SNAP, I was offered a job in Toronto as the interim director of lithography at Open Studio. Open Studio is a kind of a relative of Malaspina in Vancouver, a cooperative printmaking studio. So I was, for a few years, I was the director, and then I became an artist member. And I guess I'm going into this right now because it's the 50th anniversary of Open Studio. And I was involved in a very interesting project there, which, because of COVID, no one has seen. So I'll give you a little glimpse. So there were 50 artists who were invited to participate, and I'm going to give you a little glimpse. We were each given a piece of wood, like a giant puzzle piece, about 24 by 36, and we had to work on both sides of it, leaving a slit so it all could be put together in a tower. So I'm just going to share with you the piece that I did there because I have now a 30-year relationship with Open Studio of their 50 years. And so mine was a collage called 30 Years of Lithography. So I'll just give you a glimpse, and I'll send to the newsletter so people can see the actual exhibition.
Excellent.
But to give you an idea of what the towers were to be made of, the initial forms. And then this was the interior of my piece. And I'll show you now. Let me sit down. The piece was called Murmuration, which was the flocking of birds. And so this was the idea of the flocking of the images of people. And one of the reasons that I did such repetitive sequencing in my pieces was to mimic the idea of murmuration. So yes, Toronto, I think I'm not quite sure where I was in my life history, but I moved to Toronto, which was to be for 18 months, lasted for 23 years. And then the next move was to Gabriola.
And how did you find Gabriola?
We visited the West Coast frequently, the combination of my father being in Victoria and my son being in Ucluelet after he went to UVic. And we would visit various islands just for amusement, as people do.
Mm-hmm.
But once we came to Gabriola in '98, this was the only island we ever wanted to go to. And we had no plan or concept that we could actually move here, but we would just visit every about 3 years. And in 2008, we just thought, that's it. We'll never get here unless we just come, and then we can figure it out. So we went home and sold our house, and here we are. And now this took us a year before we found a place to purchase, and then another year to renovate it. And this was a carport, and now it's a great studio for me. So that's how we got here.
It sounds like it was meant to be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So speaking about your move here to Gabriola and a bit of a change in lifestyle, and the pandemic is on our minds right now, obviously. You started a project at the beginning of the pandemic on your property that has taken up quite a bit of your time.
Yes.
I'd like the viewers to know a little bit about this.
Well, I usually fight very hard for all my time in the studio. It's where I'm driven to be. I put all sorts of things off because I want to be in the studio. I always have different projects that I'm really motivated to push along. And I say no to a lot of external things because of that. But once the pandemic hit, my interest in being in the studio pretty much evaporated. I was just super restless and wanted to be outside. And when we had saved all our demolition materials when we did the renovation on this house 10 years ago, this was a carport. So we had windows and all sorts of odd scraps of lumber. So we built a greenhouse, and we spent almost 3 months out there building a greenhouse, and even old staircases and all sorts of things went into it. And it was really rewarding. And I think all my kind of creative energies went into doing that. And I succeeded in wearing myself out. And I really just walked by the studio and hardly worked at all, except for responding to requests or being in dialogue with other artists. But I didn't really create any work for those first 3 months of the pandemic. And then once that project was kind of sealed up, then I was really happy to be back in here and just get rolling in all sorts of different angles.
Well, that's really interesting. So this almost forced change in your life created new space for new work.
It did. It also, I think that being outside all of the time, I know everyone in Gabriola is here because they love it. They love all the aspects of it, the trees, the birds, the animal life, the intimacy that we have to the ocean. All those things are really important to me. But being out there outside literally 12 hours a day brought a whole new set of, and having the luxury of having your phone in your back pocket all the time, crawling through the bush or whatever, and the mushrooms and one thing and another. I really enjoyed that aspect, and it certainly changed what I was doing in here.
I would love you to share your journey through art education, because what I have learned from you is that your education has never stopped throughout your career. And I'd like to know what you've learned and about your relationship, how your relationship to art has changed over the years.
Well, in terms of formal education, it was Bachelor of Arts at the University of Alberta. But although we call them residencies now, there was always workshops available and different programs. And I found that as my work matured, I think the first time I took a course outside of university was in Sun Valley, the Sun Valley Center for the Humanities, had a technical drawing course for lithography. And I just found that every time I subsequently took courses, you came back with a whole new set of vocabulary that you could use in your work. And certainly there's lots to be learned in books and now on the internet to feed into those vocabularies, but that real direct workshop experience that I've continued to do in various, whether it was fresco painting or different things over the years, has really, I think, added to the tools that I have when I'm tackling a project.
You mentioned residencies. That's my next question, actually, is you've participated in a few of them. Let us know where you've been, what you learned, and an overview of your experiences and how they shaped your work.
The most recent residency that I participated in was in the Azores. I think it was 2017. And it was a theme-based residency that an artist colleague sent me the link to apply for. It was called Once Upon Water. And at that point, I was very deeply immersed in the imagery that I was doing for Ancient Light and the Edge series, which was all about that connection between shoreline, erosion, movement of water, how in different locations, the water is a very, very different kind of color and different quality. And so it seemed like a really good match. And because it was a thematic residency, and it was only for visual artists, there were so many different perspectives, whether they were videographers and people did all sorts of different work. But with the theme and people having individual studios and being on this incredible shoreline in the Azores, very different than our own shoreline, but also just the small islands, the ferries between, the volcanic rocks. So I did go with some expectations. Sorry, mask slippage. I did go with some expectations of what I would achieve there, but those very quickly changed because of the environment and because of discussions with other people. And even things like humidity, the way that I work here, it was impossible for me to work with my same materials there because it was so humid that things didn't dry.
Of course.
So, really valuable in terms of all of it. And I was doing some of these small Leporello books there that related directly to the experience there because they're very portable. This one, in fact, because they have volcanic rock there. I don't know how much we can see, but you get the idea. So I would do studies with the intention of sometimes I will use these studies to do larger work once I'm back in the studio. And sometimes they're just a document of place. Yeah. And sorry,
I was just going to ask you you talked about fresco painting.
And that was a very different thing. And that was I think in the 90s that I went to study that, because you had to apply by imagery that you would produce there. And 10 international artists were chosen. But then we got to work with masters of fresco to apply and to work through all of those ancient techniques. And it was an amazing experience. But then when you come back and you're in an 8th floor warehouse in Toronto, dragging bits of sand and marble dust, it wasn't quite the same.
I guess not.
Although you still have some in the crawl space. Yeah.
And what about New Zealand? You did a residency there as well.
It was in 2015. And that was beginning of I was focusing on shorelines. So that predated the Azores. And I began working with a new for me type of material. Again, what can you travel with? And I was traveling with a paper called Yupo, which is what you see behind me on the works on paper on the wall. And UFO has the feature of not absorbing, so you can really work with this liquidity. It's also light, and you could take 40 pieces of paper in a very small envelope, or not an envelope, but a package. And that residency was different in that it was not limited to visual artists. There were writers, photographers, poets. So all of those other disciplines, I think, informed my desire for narrative in that project. And that is the project that ultimately came to lead to Kay Louise and I doing a collaboration that was called Ancient Light. It didn't have a name when it was started in New Zealand, and the name developed as we worked together.
That is a perfect segue into the next question. You're a pro. It's about collaboration and the various collaborations that you have done. You mentioned Kay Louise Vincent with the book Ancient Light. So I'd really like you to speak about that, as well as your collaboration with your lifelong artist friends, the Gibson Girls.
Yes. With Kay, I met Kay the first year I was here in 2009. I showed at the Jeremy Maud Gallery that lasted, was for a short period of time in the village. And Kay came and she really connected with a mezzotint series that I had done called A Thin Place. And she spent a lot of time looking and engaging and then bringing all her friends to show. And so that's how we got to know each other. Then ultimately I read her work, and there was a particular phrase that was a liquid art of unlocking that just, every time I would think that phrase, I'd practically cry because somehow it just moved me so much.
What was that phrase again? If you could say it a little bit slower.
The liquid art of unlocking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we just developed a friendship in terms of responding to each other's work. And when I came back from New Zealand with the series that became Ancient Light, I think I had done maybe 12 paintings at that point, and the series ultimately became 39 paintings. So I was still new in the series. And Kay really responded to those works and then began her own process of writing both poetry and an essay about the work. And over a 2-year period, we developed a book. So that was a very intense collaboration. Yeah.
What did you take away from that collaboration besides the book, of course?
The book, it's wonderful to have a permanent thing like a book.
For sure.
Oh, I don't really know how to answer that question because it was such an intense process. The focus became quite time consuming, and so then it's sort of over, and then you normally, I think, as with in all of my work, I suppose working in a collaboration like that, there's the motivation of sharing that you go forward together. And when you're doing your individual work, you might be working along and then you take a branch off and I follow that path where it branches off. But when you're in the process of that collaboration, we had to follow it through in a very specific way. Yeah.
Interesting. And tell us about the Gibson Girls.
So the Gibson Girls, all originally, we were either at Open Studio as printmakers or in warehouse painting studios. And so for 25 years, we have gone on an annual canoe trip. And when I first moved here, they all came out and we went to the Broken Group on a kayaking trip. We work in very different disciplines, but we have this core relationship for so many years. And we all live in very different places now. So with me on Gabriola, one of them is half-time in Port Hope and Porto Escondido, another in Newfoundland, another part-time in Lithuania. So over the years, this commitment to a week a year in a rural camping and canoeing portaging trip has become quite a big thing for us to do. And in 2018, one of our gang, whose name is Liz Parkinson, suggested that we develop a project called Where I'm At Now, a Conversation in Art. And her suggestion was that we would each, I won't show these close up, but the project has really gone quite crazy. Initially, she gave us each just 4 little cards. These happen to be pencils from our Gabriola. 4 cards in which each of us would, 5 cards each. We would each make our own imagery in a related cycle and mail it to the other 4 Gibson girls. They would work on it and mail it. So all 5 of us, and as we work on them, you sign the back. So all 5 of us work on every card. So the first year we did a cycle, 8 cycles. So that was 200 cards, and we exhibited them at Open Studio in Toronto. This year we have done 12 during COVID, 12 cycles. So it takes every card about 5 months to go in its mailing journey to encounter all of us. So at this point, we are nearing the completion of 500 cards. And interestingly, mail art has become a thing during COVID, where people are tired of everything being digital and mailing out handmade postcards. And we had started it 2 years ago.
Lovely.
So that is that project. I hope to bring it here at some point.
Oh, yeah.
We were supposed to have a show last May in Lithuania, which was canceled and is in theory going to happen in May of 2022, but we shall see.
It'll happen. We have to have faith. The art shows will happen again, for sure.
Yeah. So that has really been a great collaboration, and we plan on still canoeing for decades to come if we can manage it.
I love it. I can't wait to hear about what you collaborate on going forward.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Speaking of mail, you had a postmark deadline not long ago, and it had to do with Brooklyn. Did you want to talk about that a bit?
This has been my year to say yes to everything that's happened. And an artist colleague suggested doing, it's called the Brooklyn Art Library, and they have a sketchbook project in which the physical sketchbooks can be taken out and borrowed, but they're also digitized. And I think at this point, there are something like 5,000 digitized sketchbooks, because this is volume, the 17th year. So I thought, that's a good idea. I'll just do the sketchbook. I have my own sketchbooks that I do as companion pieces to the larger work, so that I can make notes about the color or where I want to go with a particular series. So I received my sketchbook in September, and I knew that the deadline was in February, and I put it on a corner of my work table, and I left it there until the beginning of February. So it became a really different kind of a book than I initially intended. And I ended up calling it Notes from a Small Island in the Pacific Northwest, because I ended up, instead of documenting kind of what my painting cycles were, I ended up doing it more as a memoir of this time on Gabriola, or not even on Gabriola, yes, it's on this island, but more of a memoir of all of the things that have felt important during this time, whether it's from books that I was reading. I always take notes and quotes, and I make sure that I always document who they're from, because sometimes a phrase will just take you on such a long path. So I managed the deadline. I got it there in time.
Excellent.
But it did become a very different book, but it really became very enthusiastic about it, about this. And there was a lot more photography, lots of little color tests that all related in the book. And sadly, of course, well, I did scan it to have a document, but it will be properly digitized for the library as well. And so it's something anyone can do it. I think it's an exciting project, especially in a time like this, where you are in a different perspective, right?
How big was the sketchbook?
They're 5 by 7, just a little, like, sadly, I only have the copies to show, but it's 5 by 7. And
with like 20 pages or?
I think so.
Yeah. I noticed one of the images you had in there, you had shared with the GAC newsletter. of your picture underneath underneath the dock. That was a great story.
Yeah. So that's, and I think in the photograph there where you could actually see all the things that were growing underneath the dock. It's one of those perfect, completely calm days that you could, wait for 9 months to get the next one like that, where the light was perfect and the water was flat. And it was great.
Excellent. What value do you find in participating in these international projects? You just got some good news the other day about another one.
I'll keep forgetting what it's called. It's so new. I probably didn't know the title. It's called Earth Patterns. So again, this is a good thing about far-flung artist colleagues who know your work and have different streams of information that they get that I might not get. And so again, someone sent me, said there's a curatorial call out for a photographic project called Earth Patterns out of Norwich, England, near Cambridge. So I thought, again, the deadline was in 2 days. And I was like, okay. And I did it in 2 days. And normally I think I would have procrastinated, but I think somehow now I'm just like, yes, okay. And so I just found out that I was accepted in this large show. So I don't know, it's exciting to, especially now that so many of the conversations are digital. Why not? And as almost everyone who knows me, I'm pretty allergic to social media, so I might as well try it out some other way.
Just dip your toe in the water and see how it goes, right? When we were chatting the other day, you mentioned a few times about the printmaker in you, and that's a recurring theme is your process. How does that influence the work that you do now and the approach that you take?
Yeah, so I'm doing very little in the way of printmaking currently. Okay, sometimes I still do dry points or mezzotints. But in terms of the technique that I've developed from my own painting, I think it relates very strongly to printmaking, in part because of the rigid surfaces that I work on. So that in lithography, you're drawing on a stone, you're scraping it off, you're etching it. It's a very physical process. And in terms of painting, like in university, I didn't like painting because the only way it was offered was on canvas. And between the weft and the weave and the fact that the canvas would move under my hands as you applied pressure, I didn't ever really relate to that. But I've been painting for a long time now on these big panels. So, probably 25 years anyway. And so that ability to go really into that wooden surface, whether it's sanding, repainting, developing textures that are appropriate to the marks you want to make rather than the ones that are given in a woven surface. So that kind of, and layering in printmaking, it's all about layering, and you can see the layers that kind of almost revealed from behind. So that's something that I respond to really strongly.
Before we started, you were telling me about not liking the canvas, the feeling of it, which I found super, super interesting. And then also your ability to redo. And you made reference to the piece behind you. So talk a little bit about that piece, the name of it, and how long it took you.
Well, this is called Traces of Water. And I really wanted this idea of the visibility of the water moving towards you, and then also being opaque. When you think of a wave and it falls forward, then you can't see what's behind anymore. So I wanted a kind of luminous quality, but also one that wasn't too specific about what was really happening. But I have been working on it off and on. I have battled this for about 8 months. It's been sanded down, it's been painted white. It's had all sorts of things happen to it in the 8 months. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I think we've arrived. So, and moving it over to this corner to set up the studio, what I really liked was looking out the window, and you can see how much that palette is just so cohesive.
Tim, could you get a shot of that for us? I should have asked before I asked the question. It's a really beautiful piece, and
Shall I
it's
get out of the
amazing
way?
with the, no, you look good with it. With the shot outside as well. The colors are, it's incredible. It's like you just did it to
Yeah.
match the color and the light outside right now.
And of course, the color and the light outside will be changing soon, because once the deciduous trees come in, it's
Yes.
a completely different
Completely different.
planet out there.
Little view of the studio. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. I have to tell you that.
Yes.
And as Tim brings us back to the main shot again, I'm in love with the Laparella books. I think these are the coolest little things going. Sad that you say they're not for sale, but what is their purpose and how do they serve you?
In a variety of ways. I mean, I started working on them during residencies as a way of taking notes and bringing it back, but now they're a project all on their own. And in this case, this one, so I had already done these larger, nearly dusk all day pieces. But I wanted, again, that sort of aspect of narrative. And so using the same palette that I used on the larger one, but there's a kind of jewel-like intimacy, I think, that comes in this scale. And then also sometimes it's just completely a way to work through an idea that I don't want to incorporate into anything larger, but I do want to react to what's going on in the environment. So in the summer, when the fires in California, Washington, and Oregon were blowing, I think, did we have the smoke first and then the ash? I think so. And so first I did some smoke paintings on a transparent UPO because everything was already obliterated, and it was so strange. I did comment in the sketchbook that I sent to the New York Library that you live in a rainforest and you can't see even the trees, let alone the whole forest, when that smoke was drifting through. But then I think no sooner did the smoke come than we had that terrible ash, and you could draw on things outside. It was, and you couldn't taste it awful. And so I dug the ash out of the fire, out of the wood stove, and did a series of ash cloud paintings because I was so perturbed by what was happening in our environment. But I don't want to do big paintings of these, but it's a record of time. And it was so satisfying to do it, to just take the ash, mix it with glue and medium, and do this experiment that is a record of 2020, right? And so the other ones, this one, because I do reference in so much of my work shorelines and stone. So these are studies that I would do before I work on aspects of our sandstone. So they all serve different purposes, and sometimes they can be a reference for me because I do take notes about how I make them. When I'm doing a larger piece and I think, oh, I'd like to have this go in this direction. The notes that I take for these do allow me to get back in there without reinventing the wheel. And I like them as a collection to continue to grow. And so I would like to exhibit them all together as I do more and more and more.
We'll have to talk about how we can do that at the Arts and Heritage Center, because people definitely need to see these. They're stunning. They're absolutely stunning. I love small things. Yeah. And when Karen showed me these, I was just like, how much? How much? But no, not allowed to buy them.
No, can I buy other little things?
Yes, which brings us, you've been experimenting with other small formats. Yeah. What led you in this direction?
So I think it all kind of came together. I'd already been working on the Laparella books for now a number of years and just adding a few every year. And then the postcard project was 4x6. And so I working in then that small series. I just really got to enjoy the 4x6 format. So I started to work with UPO on panel and frame them, and you can see a few of them by Carol. So I've been doing those, I think, for about 2 or 3 years now. Again, responding sometimes to the bigger work, and sometimes I'll just work on a series, and that's as far as it'll go. I'll do 5 little paintings in one for a body of work, and then move on from there. And I like them in their little collections, and also, yeah, again, I think there's an intimacy to that scale. As much as I like paintings that I feel like I could walk into, I also like the intimacy of working in that smaller scale.
You've said it a few times. I think we need a definition for the viewers at home who don't know what it is. What is UPO?
UPO is, it's called a paper, but it's basically plastic. It was invented originally for commercial printing purposes, because you can't tear it. But it is impervious to, it doesn't dry like watercolor paper. It dries on the surface. So you have to paint flat, and you have to be patient. And you can also move, like with these, the pigments, I just keep them moving, and then I'll have to, once they dry, leave them a few days to dry, then I can come back with other pigments and add them.
So let's talk about the series that's behind us, because it's one of your more recent series called Nearly Dusk All Day. And I don't know if it's coming through the Zoom, probably not, but when you see them in person, they are 3-dimensional. I had to go right up to the prints and look at them and go, does she have layers on there? It's just crazy.
And it's so smooth. Right?
It's so smooth.
Yeah.
And these are all on UPO.
These are all on UPO. Yeah, all of the paper ones are on UPO. Yes.
So what was your inspiration for these pieces?
Well, it's very literally nearly dusk all day in our winter times, and living on Degnan Bay here, where you have that distance view over Vancouver Island. And we all know how dark it is sometime here, nearly all day. But then you'll have these gleams of yellow coming through and reflections in the water. And then also just the feeling you'll see in all of these, there's pretty strong edges on each side, which from my view here, just even looking sideways out the studio window, there's Valdez on one side and the corner of Gabriola on the other. And then this view through the channel. So they're very abstracted, but they're, basically the essence of what I see moving out there, I guess.
Beautiful.
And the change of light.
Light is a common theme for you. Lots of light.
Yeah.
I like it. Being on an island, and you've done residencies on islands, surrounded by water, obviously fits with your fascination of the intertidal zone. So I was curious about what series has been a direct result of Gabriola Shores.
Well, certainly a portion of Ancient Light was directly Gabriola.
Okay.
Is this be a good time to
show
go
ahead. Let's show it. We'll get Tim to do some awesome camera work again. Follow Karen around her studio table. So hopefully those who are doing Gabriola will recognize some aspects of our sandstone and the water moving against it. So these larger ones are definitely a result of thinking about Gabriola. And you'll see here, this is one that related much more to the kind of remembered view of New Zealand, where the palette's entirely different, right? So these two would be the ones that I have from that series where the sandstone is very much a consideration of what we have here. And maybe while I'm standing, I should just... That's exactly, yeah. I want to know about using a cement form on your latest pieces. Yeah, so my interest in rocks is
and shorelines, and just all aspects of rocks, even the stones that are used for construction was something that fascinated me for a long time previously. But I wanted to do a series that I'm calling Angles of Repose, where the stones geographically are linear. And I was really struggling with how to do that, to have these layers. And so when I described to Carol how I did it, she wondered how that was possible. So here's a demonstration of what happened. So this is the paper UFO that I mentioned that is so flexible. And to paint all these layers, I had sonotubes set up all around the studio because I could only paint one layer a day. And then after it dries, I will move it and paint the next layer. So that's how, so you can see how they're all very different. And some more layers than others. But again, that luminosity that comes from working with this material.
And what's the series called?
Angles of Repose.
Angles of Repose.
Yeah. Yeah. There we go.
Okay, well, I have one final question for you before we take questions from our viewers at home. Is what do you have in the works post-pandemic? You exhibit all over the world. Besides the Gibson Girls project in Lithuania, do you have anything scheduled?
No. Well, this new Earth.
Oh, right,
one,
your new
that
one.
will come up soon in March, at the end of March. And no, I haven't got anything planned as yet. I feel like plans aren't really happening in the art world because people just don't know. So many things have been pushed forward, whether those things will be dropped and other things will come in. So I'm back to just doing what I normally do, which is to just work through the things that interest me. And when I find the connections to get it out other places in the world, I'll try and do that. But and pretty soon it's going to be spring and I get to go outside again.
And work on your garden some more. Exactly. What do you plans for growing this season?
I'm not there yet. I know that all the experienced gardeners are right into it with their seeds now, but I'm not there yet. So no, I don't have any exhibition plans. I mean, just the group ones. Hopefully the open studio piece will be remounted. And in the meantime, I just keep working. And so when there are opportunities, I do have work to slip into the appropriate spots. So that's where I'm at with that one.
Excellent. Well, I put a little message in the chat asking everybody if they had any questions. No one's taken me up on it so far, so we'll put it out there again. If you do have any questions for Karen, please ask them in the chat and we'll see what she has to say. Is there any parting words that you'd like to share with people about your work or your vision or?
No, I just want to thank you for the opportunity, because in my mantra to say yes to everything, I said yes. And then after I thought, oh, that'll be strange, people in the studio, because it has been such an isolated time, and I think really, other than, the occasional meeting people with your own drink outside and those kind of visits, not having a busy dynamic in the studio, and just, I'm quite good at being a part-time hermit, but this is beginning to feel like a very long time. So it's been really nice to chat with real people in real time in the studio, even if we do have to wear masks. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you so much. I was so excited when you said yes. Oh, we have some questions. Chris G, not a question, but a thank you. Just enjoyed a chance to visit virtually. Thank you, Chris. And iPad Pro, I don't know who you are, but you're iPad Pro for now. Beautiful work. You're an inspiration. I have a question about which medium you're using on the Yupo paper. I love the effect.
I use fluid acrylics. So there are many different companies that make fluid or acrylics. The ones I use are golden acrylics. The reason that I use fluid acrylics in all of my work, including the work on panel, rather than the solid body acrylics, is the fluid acrylics are really highly pigmented, so that when you add water to them, you keep that brilliant pigment strength, the brightness of it, rather than it turning pastel-y. So I use fluid acrylics with usually distilled water is the way that I dilute it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for spending part of your Sunday afternoon with the Gabriel Arts Council. And thank you for joining us this afternoon. We do endeavor to have a chat with an artist, all types of artists, once a month, the last Sunday of every month. This program is not funded. And if you would like to see it continue, because we do have some expenses to make it happen, please send us your donations to info@artsgabriola.ca, and I'll put that into the chat. But for now, thank you so much and enjoy your afternoon. Oh, we missed a question.
Oh.
They came up fast at the end there. Sorry, let's rewind a bit. So do you enjoy taking and using photographs as part of your work? That was a question from Tawny.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Tawny. Yes, I take photographs all the time. And there was a period when I moved forward with producing the photographs for sale. But I'm currently, for the most part, just taking them for my own pleasure and inspiration, certainly to document color and movement and all the things that are around. But yes, they are a big influence on my work.
And Mary Ann says, thanks for sharing such a long expanse of art making, Karen. It's great to see your Nearly Dusk All Day series. Will you talk more about the conceptual ideas about duskiness they are arising from, and show us how you are capturing those ideas in these pieces?
I think that I have conflicting ideas about dusk, because when we go through the really dark days here, a part of me is just like, oh, please, it's 3:30. Like, how can it possibly be dark already? But then there's the other part about this kind of, it's a kind of liminal space where, I don't know, it's kind of floating and I guess looking for the moments of beauty that just come, because it's not just dark. I might feel like it's just dark some days, but everything is moving and changing. So I guess I'm trying to capture that transience, those little moments of magic probably would be the thing that would allow me to say, oh, this is done, is because maybe I feel like I have captured that little piece of magic.
Magic. I think that's a good way of describing it, that piece of magic. And Marianne says, thanks so much, Karen and Carol. Thanks, Marianne.
Thanks, Marianne.
So I'm going to wait like 20 seconds in case any other messages come barreling in and I miss them, because that was embarrassing. And it looks like we might be really good to go this time. So
thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll see you at the next Sunday Art Talks.